Up next, huge news just broke about Google, which just lost a major antitrust lawsuit alleging that it is a monopoly and has engaged in shady, bad business practices. I'm going to give you my take on this, and it might surprise you, but first, let's take a listen to some news coverage.
Breaking news this hour, a federal judge has just ruled against Google in a massive antitrust lawsuit. That suit involves its core business, online searches. NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung is here to help unpack all of this. Brian, this is a big win for regulators, right? Because they have been trying to argue that there was a monopoly here at Google.
Yeah, and by the way, we're still poring over this 286-page document from the District of Columbia. Really, this is a massive antitrust ruling that the judge in this case is turning onto the Sherman Act. This is basically an antitrust law that we've heard in the context of a big landmark case against Microsoft in 2001, now being used against Google here. And this judge found that there were basically two areas where Google was basically engaging in antitrust: search and text advertising, that they basically control the monopoly. They said it for the search engine. They were basically coercing companies into making Google the default search engine and not giving them much choice to go elsewhere, simply because of the massive scale that they have on advertising dollars. And on text advertising, they pointed to a pretty jarring stat that in 2020, its market share in that market was 88%. So you have Amit Mehta, the judge, saying, quote, Google is a monopolist and has acted as one to maintain its monopoly. This is a huge win for the 38 states and territories that were on this suit. What happens next? We don't know. Could there be injunctions? Could there be criminal fines potentially? We'll have to see. But the stock is down almost 4.5% on a day that's already been pretty bad.
Okay, so I do have some thoughts here, but first I just want to explain something real quick. Antitrust, if you've never heard of that, is a category of law where the federal government sometimes brings actions to break up monopolies, trust busting, it used to be called, using the government to break up a dominant company into smaller, different companies to break up a monopoly, basically. Google has been sued under antitrust law and it just lost, but of course it will be subject to appeal and all that. The first question we have to discuss here is whether Google is actually a monopoly. And that kind of depends on what version of the definition of monopoly you look at. Typically, a monopoly is thought of as just when there's only one option, right? When there's only one company offering something. And that definitely wouldn't apply to Google. There are other search engines like Bing, like DuckDuckGo. In fact, there's about 30 search engines all told that you can go and find as alternatives that are pretty easy to access if you want to. Now, another way people look at monopolies is through market share. So how much of a business do they actually have? How much of the industry is in their control? And some people say, though Google disputes this, that they have nearly 90% of the search market captured, which would be somewhat monopolistic for sure, if that's the way you're looking at it. But to me, arguing whether Google is a monopoly is kind of a mistake. It's kind of like missing the point, because not all monopolies are inherently bad. There are some certain industries and sectors that just lend themselves to monopolies. And in antitrust law for a long time, we've had something called the Consumer Welfare Standard, essentially arguing that government intervention to break up monopolies is only ever appropriate and warranted when those monopolies are being used to harm consumers. And that's where I think this whole crusade against Google just totally comes off the rails. Google isn't harming people with its dominance. It's giving us all an excellent product, mostly for free. I use Gmail every single day, as do millions and millions and millions of Americans, and it makes my life so much easier with so many great features and an amazing email service, all 100% free. I use Google Drive, and I think I have such huge files that I pay like $1.99 a month for like an extra premium plan, but most people that use it don't ever need that, and it's just free. I use YouTube, which Google also owns, to be clear, and I actually do pay for YouTube Premium because I can't stand ads, but regardless, you can have access for free to so much entertainment and unlimited information in the world. Same thing with Google Search. I do actually use other ones because I believe Google Search is biased in some ways, but outside of political topics, maybe it is an absolutely excellent and invaluable search tool that, again, is totally free. So this is what I just don't understand. why the federal government is using resources, and this is kind of a bipartisan thing actually, why the federal government is using taxpayer resources to go after a company that may or may not be a monopoly, but is objectively amazing for consumers and doing the Lord's work in terms of bringing us services and innovative stuff. Like, shouldn't the government maybe be focused on inflation, the border crisis, national security, fixing the frickin' roads, rather than going after a successful company that's just improving the lives of Americans every day? What would the point be of breaking them up? How would separating YouTube from Alphabet that owns Google Search and Gmail and all that, how would that improve anything? I genuinely don't see that argument. The only downside would be A, you're messing with the business that they should be able to run as they see fit, barring some extraordinary circumstance. And two, you'd lose a lot of the interoperability, right? The way you can sign in with Gmail to all this other stuff. I don't know why people are going after this like it's some ambition. This is something that the Republican vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, supports, and I just don't get it. It's not consistent with limited government or free market capitalism, and even on its own merits, what it would improve or achieve is completely unclear to me, yet I see some downsides, and I don't actually see a problem here that needs to be addressed. That's just my take, and look, I'm critical of big tech in many ways, I really am, but I don't want to empower the government to start breaking up companies just for its own sake. And it's disturbing to me that even many Republicans are getting so comfortable with drastic government interventions into the economy like this.